I'm Margaret Talev, here with my good buddy, Sasha Eisenberg. Mark and John are on the trail in Ohio today with Vice President Joe Biden. We're going to check in on them in a minute. But first, a new CNN poll has Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by 4 points among likely voters. That's just 49% to 44%, a much narrower margin than in other recent polls. And with just 15 days left before the election and early voting kicking off in Florida, Texas, and other states, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are shifting into the final phase of their campaigns. Trump began his closing arguments this weekend with a big speech in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And it was a speech his campaign had billed as a contract with America-style opus about what he'll do in his first 100 days as president. Instead, Trump made headlines by threatening to sue the women accusing him of sexual assault. This afternoon at his rally in St. Augustine, Trump continued to cover a lot of ground.
That's Honest Abe, Investors Business Daily. Early voting in Florida, it's not bad. A rigged system. Those pundits that dislike me and dislike you and dislike everybody. Stupidity. Some with a hammer. This just came out. She bleaches them and deletes them. You don't read about that in the New York Times. John Podesta, the element of surprise. I went to an Ivy League school with the forgotten people. This is bigger than Brexit. I love America. Quote, craziest thing in the world. Double down. Drain the swamp. NAFTA. Clean coal. Firefighters. President Obama. Sanctuary cities. The next great Trojan horse. Tippy-top shape. Ivanka Trump. Don't even think about it. An airplane graveyard. Think about it. Thank you, sir. I don't know who that guy is, but he looks a hell of a lot like Honest Abe.
Sasha?
Well, I mean, I feel like we've seen this before. Donald Trump comes out, has a sort of supposedly disciplined way of changing the conversation, and then gets distracted.
What do you make out of this? What is he trying to do, and what does it mean? How will it affect his results over the course of the next couple of weeks, and what does it do for the Republican Party?
I mean, we've seen now twice over the last week. First, when they put Melania Trump out to give an interview about whether or not she'd accepted an apology from her husband weeks earlier. And now, this weekend, with him bringing up the question of suing his accusers of sexual assault, he keeps on going back to scandals that he might have otherwise put to bed. And I think it's his way of kind of dominating the conversation on his terms. The fact is, a lot of his policy proposals aren't about him, but these controversies are, and I think is where he's most comfortable.
Is there any case to be made that this is good for him in any way? It seems like it's probably alienating a lot of women. It does take us off topic from talking about his taxes. Is there like rhyme or reason to this, or do you think he just can't help himself?
No, I mean, you know, look, I think we saw that he has yet to devote the sustained energy to telling a story about WikiLeaks that he has to relitigating these various accusations about what he has said and done around women. I don't see how it advances any interest of his.
Yeah. I think that's probably true also, and I just wonder, you can see Republicans really wringing their hands because there's the concern that it affects them as well. I mean, do you think that that bleeds over, or do you think that there's some case to be made that he can be separated from the rest of his party?
I mean, if there's any consolation, it's that Republicans like Paul Ryan, who disagree with him about immigration and trade, aren't having to answer for the fact that he said that in his first 100 days he would push legislation that they wouldn't want to vote for. Beyond that, I don't really see what any advantage is given.
Yeah, no upside. I agree.
Yeah.
Very little upside. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton was campaigning today with Senator Elizabeth Warren in New Hampshire, where the Democratic nominee offered a taste of her message for these final weeks, and then tossed her party's Senate candidate, Maggie Hassan, a very special shout-out.
I think this election is going to turn on who is motivated to vote. So we need each and every one of you to do everything you can to make it clear to everybody you know that our future is at stake. If you want to be part of a positive, optimistic, confident, unifying future, please come out and vote on November 8th. What I love about Maggie is that she's independent. She knows how to find common ground and how to stand her ground. And that is exactly the kind of leader we need in the United States Senate.
And for the past few days, Clinton and her super surrogates have been actively focused on helping Democratic candidates who are running for House and Senate seats. Here's some proof, courtesy of our friends over at Morning Joe.
I want to thank Governor Ted Strickland, our candidate for the United States Senate. Elect Roy Cooper, your next governor. Send Katie McGinty on behalf of Pennsylvania to the United States Senate. She's running against someone who refuses to stand up to Donald Trump. Pat Toomey heard Donald Trump insult a grieving Gold Star family who lost their son in Iraq. He heard Donald Trump insult African Americans, POWs. He heard him engage in saying terrible things about women. How much does he have to hear or to see?
Sasha, the President Obama, meanwhile, is expected to endorse, like 150 candidates across 20 states, all these state legislative candidates, much sort of deeper down the ticket than he has in the past. Is there any downside to this sort of Clinton-Obama dual strategy of putting all this investment in the down ticket and even some kind of non-key states at this point?
I mean, it's very unlike Obama, who has resisted any effort to be a kind of figurehead for his party. I think this is in the Clinton DNA. They believe in building local parties and supporting local candidates. I think the challenge for her, the risk, is that she spent a lot of time trying to give Republicans and right-leaning independents cover. I mean, we saw the ads where she had former Bush administration officials on stage at her convention. She had Republicans, a lot of military officials. This is kind of taking that sheen off. She's basically saying, I'm a Democrat in good standing, and the risk is you tell those Republicans who seem to have been coming along to her, the sort of college-educated Republicans, that she might not be one of them.
It's a little bit of mixed messaging, although I think, to me, the sort of flip side of the argument is that if there's a situation where it's a close race at all, where Donald Trump contests the results of the election, the stronger and the broader and the deeper a sweep that she's able to have gives her maybe a little bit more ammunition. Maybe that's what she's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this might be the sign of somebody who's willing to torch a few points in her margin in exchange for the benefits that come along with a Democratic Senate and some party building in parts of the country where Democrats haven't had a few good cycles.
And like you can do that with a 12-point margin, not a 5-point margin.
I think that's
we'll see an about-face in the last week if it's a 2-point margin.
I think that's absolutely right.
As we mentioned, Hillary Clinton shared a stage today with the progressive icon Elizabeth Warren, and things got nasty.
Get this, Donald. Nasty women are tough. Nasty women are smart. And nasty women vote. And on November 8th, we nasty women are going to march our nasty feet to cast our nasty votes to get you out of our lives forever.
But what does she really think? She wasn't the only voice from the left that made news today. In an interview with the Washington Post, Bernie Sanders, you remember Bernie Sanders, said he and other senators are planning to pressure Clinton on progressive legislation if she becomes president. And he offered a blunt warning that he'd cause problems if she does not appoint liberals to key cabinet positions, including the Treasury Secretary. Warren is out on the trail. Sanders is back doing this. What does it say, Sasha, about the relationship between Clinton and the progressives and the left, whether they're going to get along or whether they already have problems?
I think there's a flip side of people seeing a big margin and Clinton on the cusp of a potentially sort of all-encompassing victory. And I don't think they want the story to be told that she won either because she brought over a lot of Republicans and expanded the coalition so broadly that diluted their influence, or that she just won because Trump was a disaster, right? And so this is putting a marker down early in a way that may be counterproductive for her, but a way of trying to tell a story about the election that makes them more central.
Well, right, they've already sort of hemmed her in on TPP, or they think they have, or they hope they have, or they believe maybe they have, right? Although, I think that Warren and Sanders are really doing the same thing. They're just doing it in slightly different ways. Sanders is sort of like more awkwardly coming out and saying, I'm going to challenge her. Warren's doing the opposite. She's out on the stump saying, I love Hillary Clinton, I'll do anything for her. But it's implicit, isn't it, that that's a limited time offer with strings attached.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And first of all, Elizabeth Warren has a gift for a soundbite that I don't think we saw coming from Harvard Law School. But, I think that Democrats are on the cusp of having too large a victory for the sake of having a sort of coherent
for their own
strategy. Yeah, I think it's just going to cause problems in the lame duck in the beginning of next year. If they have a coalition that includes sort of, hawkish pro-business Chamber of Commerce Republicans and the sort of organized labor anti-Wall Street left.
Clinton better get ready, right? Okay, well, as another Clinton superdelegate, Joe Biden, is barnstorming Ohio today, our dynamic duo, Mark Halperin and John Heilemann, are right there with him. We will hear their thoughts from the trail when we come right back. Joe Biden hit the Rust Belt Trail again, holding a rally this afternoon for Hillary Clinton in Ohio. John Heilemann and Mark Halperin spent the day shadowing the vice president, sounds like fun, and talked a short while ago about the influence he's been having on this presidential race.
We are here in Toledo, Ohio. Vice President Biden in the midst of a 3-city tour. Long day for him in Ohio on behalf of Hillary Clinton. One official event in Cleveland talking about the fight against cancer. But what strikes me so far is how much Joe Biden campaigning in 2016 is like Joe Biden campaigning in 2008 when he first ran.
Or 2012 or any other time.
Or 1988.
One thing about Joe Biden is that this is a man who loves the campaign trail, loves it, loves it. A lot of candidates, like, they don't love the retail part of it. They don't love the fundraising part. What they like is, you know, being in office. Joe Biden likes doing this stuff, getting out, pressing the flesh, being with the folks. And this is really, I mean, he may at some point campaign again, but in any official capacity, this is his last campaign, not on the ballot himself, but he's taking advantage of this. He wants to be out there, and he's doing a ton of stuff, not just for Hillary Clinton, but for down-ballot candidates. He's really been focused on Senate candidates, Democratic Senate candidates in places that Democrats need to win in order to take over the upper chamber.
He's a guy who knows, both from the vantage point of being in the White House, but also from being on the Capitol Hill, the difference for the Democratic Party and for Hillary Clinton's presidency, if she wins, of being in the majority versus the minority. And he knows a lot of the senators. He knows a lot of the Senate candidates. And so he is, as you said, focused with a granular way on who's on the ballot, what are their chances, what he can do to help them raise money, do events. And you see in all these campaigns now a very integrated Democratic Party, a very unified Democratic Party. And the stop he made in Cleveland at a Clinton campaign office, you see in the brochures and the literature there, very much focused on who else is on the ballot, and very much focused on the Obama-Biden legacy. One of the fascinating things to me is how he talks about the notion of, well, Hillary Clinton is going to keep things going, but do even more. Right. Very much in line with the tightrope that Hillary Clinton has had to walk. She doesn't want to say the last 8 years was a failure by any means, but building on them. And very effective at doing the exact same thing.
Right, but I do think this down ballot thing is really what's striking, because we're seeing President Obama now is doing all these endorsements for House candidates, doing a lot of stuff for Senate candidates. Joe Biden here in Ohio today, tomorrow in Pennsylvania. They are now shifted in a way. The surrogate operation was always very strong for Hillary Clinton because of the people she has. She today is with Elizabeth Warren up in New Hampshire. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Joe Biden, they were going to be important to her campaign. Now it's as they are all feeling more secure and more confident that Hillary Clinton is going to win, they're now starting to say, hey, we can afford to shift our focus a little bit. He's doing Hillary Clinton events here, but Ted Strickland's here today running from way behind in the Senate race in Ohio. But you can see all the super surrogates now starting to say, we're still campaigning for Hillary Clinton, but we're also now campaigning to just generate Democratic enthusiasm in key battleground states where there are senators that we must elect if Hillary Clinton is going to have a Democratic, or at least half of the Democratic legislature, and maybe total control of the Capitol Hill if the thing keeps moving in her direction.
Yeah. The other thing you see when you go out with Biden, as we've seen already today, is a guy who continues to balance. People have a great affection for him, but even though he's been a vice president now for almost 8 years, he is still regular Joe. When he's mixing with people, they're glad to see him. They're inspired by him, but they're not in awe. They're not intimidated. He puts people at ease.
He doesn't want that.
Yeah, he doesn't want that. He doesn't do anything to inspire it.
Yeah.
And he joked this morning in Cleveland about how he's like the poorest guy ever to be a vice president, and when he was in the Senate, one of the least wealthy senators. Yeah. And he wears all that like a badge of honor.
People think that he took the Amtrak train because he wanted to be, stay close to the people. He also took it because he couldn't really afford to fly back and forth.
Yeah, or to have the two houses.
Yeah, I'm just joking.
This is a state where of all the battleground states, for just a month ago, people talked about Hillary Clinton not winning Ohio. Yeah. You can tell from the way Joe Biden is acting here, from the focus the Democrats are putting on it. If there is going to be this movement towards Hillary Clinton that we're seeing in the national polls, maybe they can put Ohio in the Democratic column, which would be a big boost for the party, obviously.
Right. It's still of the battleground states, it's still the place where Donald Trump is doing best, along with Iowa, places where he seems to be either a little bit ahead or at least very, very close. Basically, now they're kind of coin toss states. The other thing you see in Biden, we saw earlier today with him in Cleveland, is just the degree of contempt that he has for Donald Trump. Not at all unique among true blue Democrats, but the comment that he made the other day about wanting him to take him out behind the bleachers, he hasn't said anything that provocative today, but you can sense it. And he just he
brings it up easily.
It boggles his mind that Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, and he does not hesitate in expressing that sense of befuddlement and irritation bordering on anger.
All right, we're going to leave it there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the state of the overall presidential race from here in Toledo right after this.
we're back from Toledo, Ohio. We're here with Joe Biden, spending the day with him here as he hits the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton and for other Democrats across the state. Mark, we talked a little bit about Biden. We talked about Democratic prospects in general. Just give me a sense of where you see Donald Trump out on the campaign trail today, Hillary Clinton out on the campaign trail today. Let's talk a little more broadly about the presidential race and what's going on out there today.
Well, it's interesting. There's enough data out there that Republicans can convince themselves that this race isn't over. There's some new state polls that show the race quite close in some of the battleground states, even though you see the national polls now, one after another, showing a very wide lead for Hillary Clinton. And Republicans are doing the kinds of things you do when you're behind and talking about maybe the polls are off, there's a secret vote for Trump, etc. I believe that you see in the Trump campaign now a fair amount of desperation, acknowledgement by Kellyanne Conway over the weekend. Trump is behind, but they're still looking for the right message. You know, they're talking about how clear out the swamp of Washington, but they still will jump on any new WikiLeaks disclosure. There's still 1,000 different closing messages at a time when I think if he's going to have a chance, he's going to have to focus more.
Let's talk about it in a second. Let's talk about Terry McAuliffe, but I just want to stay on this point for 1 second. It amazes me the extent to which people are amnesiac around these kinds of things. We went through this 4 years ago, the discussion of not rigged polls. Back then it was skewed polls. Yeah. Skewed polling. All the polling was skewed. It wasn't right. It wasn't right. There was clearly a hidden vote for Mitt Romney. And the Obama campaign and most of the public polling, by the time we got to this point in the race, were consistent, and they were in agreement, the public polling and the private polling. And on Election Day, that polling turned out to be true with a few tiny, tiny exceptions. I find it sort of crazy that Trump not only has he pursued this rigged election thing, but that he spent today, the thing that he got most headlines on, at a time when he should be talking about something else, talking about how the polls are all fraudulent polls, fraudulent media organizations. It's not true. And B, it's not a winning message. It's not going to be the thing that gets him. If he's going to make movement, that's not going to drive him closer to Hillary Clinton in the actual preferences of Americans. Just talking about how the polls are skewed.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the week kicks off with people looking at the ABC News Washington Post poll and looking at the 10-point margin. More 10-point margin, and that is the 12. Reality. That is the reality for Donald Trump is to try to convince people he can still win this. Yeah. He's going to need a credible national poll showing it tighter, or people in the Republican Party. You're going to see increasingly, you already are, more and more Republicans making the argument, Trump's going to lose, you got to vote for me as a check on Hillary Clinton.
Right. So we had a daily email document dump today, another day of the Podesta emails out of WikiLeaks, and the one story that's getting a lot of attention, I think is quite interesting story, is the notion that Terry McAuliffe's Political Action Committee made big donation to the wife of an important FBI investigator who ended up involved in the Hillary Clinton investigation. Obviously, the right is jumping on that. What do you think about that as a matter of both politics and substance?
Well, I mean, there's still obviously more to learn about the facts, but the key fact, from an exculpatory point of view, is that the guy wasn't in charge of the investigation until his wife's campaign had ended. Yeah. So if they were trying to curry favor with the FBI supervisor, they were doing it well in advance of his taking charge. Now, he was an FBI supervisor at a lower level, involved peripherally in the investigation. But I think this is something that Republicans are going to have a hard time having be a silver bullet. But again, I think we need to learn a little bit more, at least, about the facts of the case.
Yeah, I think that all of that I agree with. And you know, so many of these email controversies, there are things that are genuinely mildly troubling. And then when you look at them a little more closely, the timelines in particular, you find that they don't quite add up to what a lot of the scare headlines seem to suggest. The main thing I keep taking away from all these stories is we get them day after day after day without ever there being a giant bombshell that really alters the race in any significant way. It's just the extent to which it's going to be hell for Hillary Clinton to govern, to come out of this election and try to put the country back together again, because it is these various small things, which we see as small, I think, because we're exercising proper perspective, but that on the right people think are just one more log on the fire of corruption that they think are putting Hillary Clinton in, making her an illegitimate president. You know, it's always hard to bring the country back together, but it's going to be really hard for her.
Yep.
All right, we are going to wrap up here from Toledo, Ohio. We're here in Ohio all day in a bunch of different places. We're going to wrap it up and send it back to New York. For me and Mark, mini sayonara.
Thanks to John and Mark. I want to pick up a little bit, Sasha, on this whole notion that we were just discussing about Terry McAuliffe and these contributions and what it says. Is this a problem for Clinton? But also, what does it say about, like, kind of the whole Clinton machine, and if she does in fact become president, what it looks like as she would move into office? Yeah, I think that all of the WikiLeaks stuff, I mean, even her going out and campaigning for people like Ted Strickland, who doesn't stand a decent chance of getting elected to the Senate, but is somebody that the Clintons
encouraged to run on a ticket with her is just a reminder of how vast their political network is, their personal network, and it means that they, we see throughout these WikiLeaks releases the extent to which favors and loyalties kind of surround them. And, Barack Obama came in 2008, for better or for worse, entirely unencumbered by relationships, right? And it was a problem for him as he tried to govern.
Well, he jettisoned Reverend Wright. He left the Chicago developers behind, and he came here with a half of a Senate term and a clean slate.
And it's one reason that there's been 8 years of barely any scandals around this White House is because there are no sort of second or third degree connections who are in some way linked to him. And I think that that's part of the stuff that we're going to see starting next year is that, the Clintons just have too many circles around them.
If she's trying to change sort of the credibility dynamic and build that game up, and when you think about the Virginia connections, of course, Tim Kaine coming from Virginia, Terry McAuliffe would need to make a move in that direction for a replacement. All the machinations behind that, it does seem like it's just a guaranteed kind of drip, drip, drip of questions and undercutting. There's always going to be a question about campaign finance.
And also a foreshadowing of what may be the big story in 2017 in Washington, which could be a special election to fill Tim Kaine's seat for control of the Senate. And the amount of money that was spent on a simple state Senate race in Virginia will be nothing compared to what could be spent if the Senate hangs in the balance next November.
Huh. Okay, well, that's exhausting to think about. We'll be right back with our triple guest block after these words from our sponsors. Our next three guests all stand on different sides of the Trump triangle. Here in the studio have Boris Epshteyn, a senior advisor to Donald Trump's campaign, and Liz Smith, a Democratic advisor, and most recently, the former deputy campaign manager for Martin O'Malley's presidential bid. And out in Houston, Texas, we have Sarah Isgur Flores, a Republican strategist and former deputy campaign manager for Carly Fiorina's campaign. So, guys, thanks very much for joining us.
Of course.
Yes, thanks for
Wonderful to
having
be here.
I am going to toss a news flash to all of you. I really want to know what you think about this. Just as we're waiting at the break, news that Obamacare premiums are going to go up double-digit increases in many states across the country. Arizona looks like one of the biggest increases that we may see. Boris, what impact do you think this could have? This is news a couple weeks before the election. Is this going to influence or give Donald Trump kind of a new talking point for the closing argument of the race?
Well, sadly, it's not news. We've already had really significant increases in some states, over 50% of premiums. The Obamacare system simply just hasn't worked. Right? We need to be honest. It has not worked. The exchanges have failed. Insurance companies are all losing money and pulling out. And people are being taxed and punished who are not signing up. It's sometimes $1,000, $2,000 a family. So it's a broken system. Now, when Mr. Trump is president, he will repeal it and replace it.
So, Boris, he said in the first 100 days he's going to replace it. Are we going to get through the whole campaign without him saying what the replacement looks like?
No, of course. Health savings accounts. Making sure that people are covered in the states, making sure that the lines between states are disappear, that they're gotten rid of, and then making sure that people who don't want insurance don't have to buy insurance. They're not penalized for that by thousands, 2,000. But the people who do want insurance, we will do absolutely our best to replace Obamacare with a system that works, provides insurance, but does it in a way that doesn't lose money for everybody involved, from the consumer to the provider to the insurance company.
But when he repeals it, what happens to the 25 million people who've gotten coverage under Obamacare?
Well, some of those people who've gotten coverage only have partial coverage. They're actually penalized for getting coverage. So you'll have to work through we'll have to work through the system. And the health savings accounts, as you well know, is a system that works very well because it doesn't penalize anybody. It provides people with the coverage they need, and it's actually paid for and not paid for by taxes, which don't exist and really is funny money that Obama's tried to pull out of the air. And also, remember, he said if you like your system, if you like your Medicare, if you like your health care, you'll keep it. That was a lie. And also, the premium increases obviously were a lie. He said that you were not going to pay any extra money.
Guys, let's bring Sarah into this. Sarah, from your perch here in Texas, how does this look to you? And I mean, look, in the panoply of things that are making headlines these days, Obamacare really has not been one of them. How pivotal do you think this is?
No, I mean, if the Republican nominee were running a campaign on policy instead of personality, it just shows how far ahead we would be against Hillary Clinton. I think any of the other candidates would at this point be double digits ahead of Hillary Clinton at this point, and this is just one of the reasons. I think at this point, not only is it late in the game, we're 15 days out, it's hard for anything like this to really soak into the electorate, but on top of that, Donald Trump isn't making an issue out of it. Instead, he's litigating parts of his personality and his own issues in a way that doesn't allow these larger change narratives to soak in, hence why he's the only person who could possibly lose to Hillary Clinton at this point.
If I may, it's very, Sarah, with all due respect, and you're a good friend of a lot of people at the Trump campaign. Jillian Rogers says hello, by the way. So I was asked to do that. But, the key here is this. The key is that Mr. Trump did win the nomination. He defeated a lot of other good candidates, such as Carly Fiorina. It wasn't an appointment. He won the primary fair and square, unlike the Democrat primary, which was rigged against your candidate Martin O'Malley and against Bernie Sanders. Our candidate is talking about health care. That was part of the Gettysburg speech. He's also talking about infrastructure. He's also talking about illegal immigration. If the left-wing media would allow us to concentrate on that, every conversation could be like this one.
Left-wing media is going to invite a left-wing strategist.
Love it.
But Boris,
Yes. So
Boris,
just to talk about
Boris,
this.
I actually totally agree with you.
Okay, just sorry.
Boris, one just thing. I totally agree with you, except that your guy is a specialist in TV. He knows TV better than any candidate who's ever run for office in the history of the United States. He knows when he's stepping on his own message, and that's exactly what he did in Gettysburg yesterday.
Boris, hold on. Let me just jump in. And look, this is, some people would say that this is bad news for Democrats with premiums going up. But let's remember, with Medicare, with Social Security, it took some time to get those programs, which are now seen as super successful, on their feet. And both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton have acknowledged that we do need to make significant fixes to Obamacare to get it on track and stop the growth.
Do you think that Hillary Clinton has bought herself the space in the next 4 years or 8 years that she will not be held responsible if there are these sort of incremental hiccups along the way?
Yeah, I don't even think that she needs space. I think what she needs to be able to do is to implement policies to tinker around the edges. Overall, Obamacare has been a great success. 25 million people have coverage that they didn't have before. They're not using the emergency room as their primary health care provider. And if you and look, in 2012, it was an electoral winner for Democrats, with Hispanics, with women, with black voters, and it is still very popular.
But then it was implemented, and it's been a failure because it costs more money. People are losing coverage. And hold on, I'm sorry to rain on parade
really
here.
not true.
Hillary Clinton isn't going to have a room over the next 4 or 8 years because she's not going to be the president. Donald Trump is, and he is going to repeal, and he's going to replace with HSAs, with getting rid of state lines, and making sure we have a system that works, because he's a businessman that has actually created jobs before, made systems work before, unlike Hillary Clinton, who hasn't done anything that's been successful before.
Okay, on that note, Boris.
Wow.
Liz and Sarah, stay with us, please. We will continue this conversation when we come back. In my hometown of Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back. We're back with Trump campaign senior advisor Boris Epshteyn, a Democratic strategist Liz Smith here in New York, and Sarah Isgur-Flores, a Republican strategist, is with us from Houston, Texas.
Sarah, so Donald Trump tweeted recently that the U.S.-led Iraqi operations in Mosul are not going well. I sort of wonder how Republicans who've criticized Democrats for being cynical about war efforts are going to take that.
Not particularly well. I mean, on the flip side, you also saw a tweet about church bells ringing for the first time in Mosul. So Donald Trump is not someone who Republicans have looked to as a foreign policy expert through this campaign. But I think this adds to the problems that will be complicating the Republican Party after November 8th and what direction the Republican Party goes in. Donald Trump has single-handedly, as a candidate, really changed the foreign policy of the party. A lot of people in the party are uncomfortable with that.
Well, as the representative of the, another part of the party, 90% of Republicans are behind Donald Trump. 14 million voted for Mr. Trump in the primaries. There's been no surprise of where Mr. Trump stands in terms of America being put first and making sure our resources are used in a smart way. And, Americans, everyday Americans, that's what they want out of this country, to make sure that we're spending money here. And when we are abroad, we're there in a wise and smart way.
But Boris, if your candidate's elected in 2 weeks and becomes president in 3 months, if there are military operations that are currently underway around Mosul, what would he do?
Listen, you have to look at each operation out there on a case-by-case basis.
Well, no, but he's talking about this particular.
He's been very specific that in terms of operations in the past where we've pulled out abruptly, he wouldn't do that. So I'm not going to delve into the strategic planning in terms of Mosul from the defense perspective.
Do you think you'd be okay with people jumping in after a week and saying
I'm
it's
not
over?
here. I'm not here as a military specialist, but I will tell you that in terms of military strategy, it makes sense to carry out the operation, carry it out to its winning end, whatever that may be in Syria. And again, Mosul has to be part of a larger direction in Syria, which we right now do not have in this country because we don't know who we're backing. What we should be doing is defeating ISIS. But right now, as the United States, Mosul is absolutely an operation should continue and be successful. But where do we go from there? What do we do in Syria? What do we do in Libya? What do we do in terms of the ISIS-controlled territories in Iraq? We need to figure that out, and we need to figure out an ending here and a win, which Clinton and Obama have never gotten us to.
You know what's stunning to me here is how much the parties' positions have changed. In 2004, I remember the Republicans tried to, say that John Kerry seemed French. In 2012, Mitt Romney said Barack Obama went on an apology tour, which never happened. And now, the Democrats are running as the party that believes in American greatness, that believes in American exceptionalism, that believes in the greatness of our military.
Make America great again.
And Donald Trump is the Republican nominee is actively undermining the U.S. military and criticizing ongoing actions and voting for failure.
I think the issue is that it's been a week.
That's absolutely correct.
It's been a week.
What Donald Trump is saying is that if we are going to carry out operations, we need to be successful. Hillary Clinton was not successful in Libya. She was not successful in Syria. In terms of foreign policy, she was a total failure in terms of the Russian reset. Look at China, completely failed relationship. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have made this country less safe and less respected internationally. Donald Trump will do the opposite. He'll make sure that we are respected everywhere.
Boris, in the 1980s, Donald Trump was critical of the way that Americans at home received the service of Vietnam veterans when he was very proud of having raised money for a memorial in New York. Are you worried that he is diminishing the service of people currently in Iraq by saying that their mission is already a failure?
100% not. And I will tell you that about 60% of veterans back Donald Trump. Donald Trump will do for veterans what no president has. And he'll definitely will not have them dying in lines like Hillary Clinton did at the VA.
Okay. Sarah.
I think both here can be true, by the way, and you look at the numbers in the polls, it's why Hillary Clinton's untrustworthiness numbers continue to be underwater. Only 40% of Americans at this point trust her. So I think both can be true. Hillary Clinton has been bad on foreign policy time after time after time. What I hear Boris saying is a little more specific than what I've heard his candidates saying. But again, I think that's why so many Americans are actually disliking both of their options on November 8th.
Sarah, I want to go back. Let's move on from foreign policy a little bit. Look, when you look ahead to the next few weeks, maybe the next few months, there are a couple other things Donald Trump may be trying to do besides win the White House. Although if he wins the White House, I'm sure he'd be happy to stop there and be president. But can you talk a little bit, coming out of this last debate and the Gettysburg Address, about the prospects of Trump TV, the prospects of Donald Trump's post-election life, and do you see that as what's going on now, or do you think that he's really trying to win a race in the closing weeks?
No, I actually do think that Donald Trump is trying to win the presidency. I will give him that. I just don't think he knows how to do it, and I don't think he's being very effective at doing it because he can't get over his own weaknesses as a candidate, which is to stop talking about yourself, make this race about Hillary Clinton, her weaknesses. She's gotten every major foreign policy decision wrong when she was Secretary of State, and he hasn't been able to make this about her because he wants so badly for this to be about him. That's where he loses the American people, and that's where his numbers are failing. When you actually look, he's tied on leadership. He's tied on trustworthiness, same as Hillary Clinton. He loses on temperament, and badly. That's a problem, and one that he could easily have fixed if he could control his inner demons.
Right, and instead he's making it all about suing his accusers and calling the election rigged.
Liz Smith, if you were advising a Democratic candidate and they were asked to go on Trump TV in 6 months, would you encourage them to do so?
No, I don't think the Trump TV or Donald Trump should be given any oxygen after this election.
As the only one here that actually knows what's going on, let me tell you, the Facebook Live program is a way for us to carry our message directly to the American people, directly to the voters, without the veneer of the left-wing media. That's exactly what we're doing, and it's also to get out the vote, to make sure Americans. The Facebook Live that we did at the debate, it was viewed by over 200,000 at the time. In the end, about 10 million viewed it, and it touched over 20 million people. So we are using it as a way to deliver our message and make sure people go out there and vote for Donald Trump. And it'll be part of the way that we win on November 8th. It's got nothing to do with Trump TV or anything else.
And can there be Trump TV with President Donald Trump?
Excuse me, what's the question?
Can there be a Trump TV with President Donald Trump?
With President Donald Trump, there'll be all kind of opportunities for all Americans because we'll be living in a country that's revitalized economically and not sub 3% GDP growth under Clinton Obama.
Sounds like you're laying the groundwork.
Thank you very much.
For winning, that's for sure. That's what
Boris Epstein, Liz Smith, and Sarah Isker-Flores in Texas. I want to thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
We will talk about WikiLeaks and more after this break.
You have no direct contact with Julian Assange.
Correct.
You have a go-between who is a good friend of yours who's a friend of his.
Yes.
Are you suggesting that on the basis of what you know through your mutual friend, that in the next 3 weeks, that WikiLeaks will release or could release information that is substantially more damaging to Hillary Clinton than what it has released already?
Yes. I think the race is close enough and the electorate is volatile enough that any major revelation on either side could yet substantially roil and perhaps decide the race. Trump may need some breaks, but to say that he's out of it, over? Did you say over?
Right.
Nothing's over till we say it is.
It's the Embassy of Ecuador here in Knightsbridge, one of the fanciest areas of London, where Julian Assange has lived basically in captivity of his own choosing since 2012. We do know that he obsessively looks at the WikiLeaks Twitter account, so I'm going to start tweeting at the guy, see what happens.
Where are you guys from?
Where are we from? We're from the U.S. Is there anything I could do? Could I handwrite a question for him? I mean, I'd love to literally just get him to answer one question. It would only take maybe 30 seconds. What aspect of the Podesta emails do you think the U.S. media has underreported? Not going to tell me. Okay. Even if you just write a short answer.
We got an answer.
question was, what aspect of the Podesta emails do you think the U.S. media has underreported? One word: everything.
That was part of this week's episode of The Circus, Mark and John's Showtime documentary series in conjunction with Bloomberg Politics, which airs Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And here to talk about WikiLeaks and other interesting things is Washington editor of the National Review, Eliana Johnson, and political reporter for The Washington Post, Karen Tumulty. They both join us from the nation's capital. Karen, I'd like to start with you. Julian Assange says everything when asked what we are undercovering as the media in this race. What do you think of that? Is WikiLeaks being undercovered? And what do you think have been some of the most interesting and useful revelations, both in the closing weeks of this race and sort of to set the pace for the next administration?
Well, I do think they have a point that they, at least initially, were undercovered. I think that they are getting a lot of coverage now. But in terms of what has been revealed, the specifics are not all that revelatory, not all that shocking. But what it does is it really gives you a sort of behind-the-scenes look at the kind of hand-wringing and strategizing that goes on internally within a campaign, and also for those of us who are junkies about this stuff, you know, a lot of the backbiting, a lot of the organizational tension, which has been interesting in that the, you know, Clinton operation on the outside seems to have run pretty, you know, in a pretty disciplined way, certainly a big contrast from her last campaign in 2008. But what we see in these emails is that they are not without tension, and some of the old problems, including a lot of the sort of Clinton hangers-on, have continued.
Eliana, do you think that there has been a smoking gun, so to speak, in these WikiLeaks? And how much of the sort of level of coverage do you think can be explained by media bias? How much of the level of coverage do you think can be explained by Donald Trump just making so much news on other fronts that it's kind of hard to stay focused on the first thing?
Well, the first batch of these emails came out the same day and over the same weekend that the Trump Access Hollywood tape featuring his lewd remarks about making unwanted advances towards women came out. And so I do think it was natural that the Trump remarks were covered over and above these emails. And that's largely why I think that they've gotten less coverage than maybe they should have. There was less excitement and attention paid to the subsequent rounds of emails that have come out. I also think slightly understandably, but the smoking gun, I would say, that has been in these emails is not only do they reinforce what people already thought about Hillary Clinton, that there's a tremendous amount of strategizing about how she's presented to the public and about all the tensions between the forces in her network, the Clinton Global Initiative, the financial aspects of that versus her public appearances, what Bill Clinton is doing on the side. But they also haven't disabused the public of any notions that the public has had about her honesty, about her transparency, and they've reinforced those things. And I think that the biggest thing that could have come from these emails was something that would have made the public turn and look and say, oh, wow, these are honest people of character who what we've thought about them is wrong. And I do think it's a blow to Hillary Clinton and those in her orbit that there's been nothing like that to turn to and point to in these emails. And I do think that though Donald Trump is getting the bulk of the attention right now during the campaign, once she gets into office, which it does seem she's likely to do, these sorts of things are going to haunt her throughout her entire presidency.
EJ, there's been a lot more coverage in the conservative media of some of the particulars of what's been in the emails. Daily Caller in particular seems to be sort of flooding the zone. Have you seen anything sort of picked up that you think has the potential to break through into, you know, sort of mainstream mass media and become more of an issue in the day-to-day of the remaining weeks of this campaign?
I think that her comment about wanting free trade and open borders is certainly going to haunt her with the far left. Her remark about free trade will, and her remark about open borders will haunt her with the right. What you hear immigration restrictionists or immigration hawks say, it's sort of, they're considered feverish and crazy for saying that what some on the left really want is open borders. And here we have Hillary Clinton really saying that outright in her emails. And so it won't be fair for her to say that these people are crazy right-wingers accusing the left of something that they don't really want, and of not coming to the table with good faith about protecting the border and securing the border. No, that's what she said outright. And the other thing, I think, is what really looks like a pay-to-play on Morocco. She wasn't Secretary of State, but she was running for president when that happened, and I think that's pretty damning.
Okay. Karen Tumulty, Eliana Johnson, thank you both, and we'll be right back. There's more 2016 coverage on BloombergPolitics.com. Bloomberg Technology is next, and Mark and John are back tomorrow. From me and from Sasha, sayonara.